He was already sitting on the curb outside his own gate when she walked out. Thomas Hale had been sitting there for 22 minutes in a coat that smelled like a thrift store and shoes that had seen 3 hard winters before he bought them for $6 on a Tuesday. He had chosen the spot deliberately, close enough to his property that anyone leaving through the side gate would have to walk directly past him, far enough from his security cameras that his own face recognition system would not flag him. He had thought of everything, except her. Grace Obie came through the side gate at 7:14 in the morning the way she came through it every single day, punctual in the specific way of someone who respects time, because time was one of the few things in her life that had ever been entirely hers to manage. She was 34, had worked in Thomas Hale's household for 4 years, and moved through the world with a quiet efficiency that he had always noticed but never fully examined. She was carrying 2 bags. Her own bag over her shoulder and a separate smaller bag in her right hand that Thomas did not recognize. She came through the gate, turned left, and stopped. She looked at him the way people look at someone they were not expecting to see. Not with alarm. Not with the careful, studied non-seeing that city people develop for survival. She actually looked at him the way you look at something that requires your attention. "Good morning," she said. Thomas kept his eyes low the way he had practiced. "Morning." She stood there for a moment. Most people in his experience did not stand there for a moment. Most people kept walking. "Have you eaten?" she asked. Thomas looked up slowly. She was looking at him with direct, calm eyes that were not performing concern. They were just asking a real question. "Not yet," he said. She opened the smaller bag. She pulled out a container and a bottle of water and crouched down and set them on the curb beside him with the matter-of-fact ease of someone who had done this before. "It's jollof rice and eggs," she said. "I made extra this morning." Thomas looked at the container, then at her. "You made extra." "I do most mornings," she said simply. "There's always someone." She stood up, adjusted her bag on her shoulder, and walked to the bus stop at the end of the street without looking back, without waiting for a thank you, without any of the small performances people attach to acts of generosity when they want credit for them. Thomas sat on that curb with a container of jollof rice and eggs in his hands and felt the first crack appear in the wall of assumptions he had built about why he was sitting there. He had not come outside to be moved. He had come outside to gather information. 3 weeks ago, Thomas had fired his previous housekeeper, a woman named Patricia, after discovering she had been systematically overcharging on household accounts for 18 months. The amounts were not enormous. That was almost the worst part. Small enough to avoid detection, large enough to add up to something significant over time. The betrayal had not hurt because of the money. It had hurt because Patricia had sat at his kitchen table and drunk his coffee and asked about his health with apparent genuine warmth for a year and a half, while quietly taking from him. He had promoted Grace to head housekeeper the following Monday. She had been the obvious choice. Reliable, skilled, trusted by the rest of the small household staff. But the experience with Patricia had planted something in Thomas that he could not dig out with reason alone. He needed to know who Grace Obie actually was when no one important was watching. And so the coat from the thrift store. And so the curb outside his own gate. He ate the jollof rice. It was genuinely good. That almost made him feel worse about what he was doing. He came back the next morning in the same coat and the same shoes. This time she came through the gate at 7-Eleven, and she stopped again, and she said, "Good morning" again, and she pulled out another container. "You came back," she said. "Warm enough here in the mornings," Thomas said. She sat down on the curb beside him, instead of just handing the food over and walking. Thomas had not anticipated that. He adjusted his cap lower. "What's your name?" she asked. "Thomas," he said, because some mistakes from previous tests had taught him that using a false name created complications he did not want. "I'm Grace." "I know," he said, and then caught himself. "Common name." She looked at him sideways. Not suspiciously, more like she was filing something away. "Have you been on the street long?" "A while." "Do you have people anywhere?" "Had a son. We lost touch." That was not part of any script. It came from somewhere he had not planned to go, and he closed it off immediately. Grace was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry," she said. "That kind of lost touch, or the other kind?" "The kind where it was my fault," he said. She nodded. She did not try to fix it or soften it or redirect it. She just let it be what it was, which was one of the rarer human skills Thomas had encountered in his 63 years of living. They sat on the curb together for 8 minutes. She asked him nothing else personal. She talked about the weather turning and whether the shelter on Delancey Street was still running its breakfast program, and she told him she had a neighbor who made the best pepper soup in the city and sometimes brought him extra, and his name was Mr. Chuckwu, and he was 81 years old and walked with 2 canes and never complained about anything. She talked about people the way people talk about people when they actually see them. Then her bus came, and she stood up and said goodbye and walked to it, and that was that. Thomas sat on the curb for another 10 minutes after the bus pulled away. He went back inside through his own front door, nodded at his security team, went upstairs, changed out of the thrift store coat, and sat in his office for an hour doing nothing in particular, which was something he almost never did. His personal assistant, David, knocked at 10 and came in with a morning schedule. "Clear my afternoon," Thomas said. David looked up from his tablet. "You have the Meridian call at 2 and the Okafor meeting at 4. Reschedule both." David noted it without comment, because David had worked for Thomas for 9 years and had learned that the times Thomas cleared his afternoon were the times something was actually happening. What was happening was that Thomas was thinking. He was thinking about Patricia and the overcharged accounts and the coffee and the apparent warmth. He was thinking about the test he had designed and the assumptions it was built on. He was thinking about a container of jollof rice left without waiting for a thank you. He was thinking about a woman who sat on a curb with a stranger and talked about an 81-year-old neighbor with 2 canes who never complained. And underneath all of that thinking was a quieter thing that he had not fully admitted to himself yet, which was that he had not been entirely honest about his reasons for designing this test. The professional reason was legitimate. Had a household staff, trusted with access to everything. He needed to know her character. That was real, but there was another reason, one he had been circling for 4 years without ever landing on it. If this story is doing something to you right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because this is only getting deeper from here. Grace Obie had worked in his house for 4 years, and in that time Thomas Hale had watched her from a careful professional distance and told himself repeatedly that what he observed was simply respect for a good employee. The way she managed the younger staff with firmness and fairness. The way she anticipated problems before they arrived. The way she occasionally left a cup of tea outside his office door on late evenings without being asked and without mentioning it. He had told himself all of that was professional observation. Sitting in his office on a cleared afternoon, he admitted to himself that it was not entirely professional. He went back a third morning. This time he arrived before she came out, and he was already on the curb when the gate opened. She came through at 7:09, saw him, and smiled the way people smile when they see someone they expected. She sat down beside him without preamble and pulled out the container and the water. "You're reliable," she said. "You are too," he said. She looked at him. "You said you had a son." "I did. Have you tried reaching out to him?" Thomas looked at the street. "It's complicated. Most real things are," she said. "But complicated doesn't always mean impossible. Sometimes it just means you have to start with a small thing. One sentence. One call. Something small enough that failing at it doesn't feel like losing everything." He turned and looked at her directly for the first time in 3 mornings. Really looked at her. She was looking at the street, not at him, which meant she was not saying it for effect. She was just saying it. "What if you hurt the person enough that a small thing feels insulting?" he said. She thought about that for a moment. "Then you say that. You say, I know a small thing might feel insulting given what I did, but a small thing is all I have right now, and I am offering it. And then you let them decide." She paused. People generally want the people they love to try, even when they are angry, even when the trying comes late. Thomas was quiet for a long time. "You speak like someone who has been on both sides of that," he said. She was quiet for a moment. "My mother and I didn't speak for 3 years. I was the one who needed to try first. I kept waiting to feel ready. Then I realized feeling ready was not going to come." She picked up her water bottle. "I called her on a Wednesday with nothing prepared. I just said her name, and she said mine, and we cried for about 5 minutes, and then we figured it out." She almost smiled. "She made me pepper soup when I came home. The good kind." Thomas pressed his hands together on his knees. "Grace," he said. "Yes. If you found out that someone had been watching you, testing you, to see what kind of person you were when no one important was looking, How would you feel about that? She turned and looked at him fully. For the first time in 3 mornings, there was something different in her expression. Not the filing away, not the calm observation, something more careful. Are you asking me a hypothetical question? She said slowly. Or a real one? Thomas reached up and pulled the cap off his head. The change in her expression was something he would not forget. It moved through her face in stages, recognition first, then disbelief, then something that was working very hard to stay composed. She stood up from the curb. "Mr. Hale," she said. Her voice was completely controlled. "Grace, you sat outside your own gate." She said it not as an accusation, but as a person laying out facts while they processed them. 3 mornings. In a coat and a cap. To test me. Yes. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the container in his hands. The jollof rice and eggs she had made extra of. She looked at that container the way you look at something that means two different things at the same time, and you have to decide which meaning to carry forward. "What were you looking for?" she asked. He stood up from the curb. He was taller than her by almost a foot, and he was aware of how that looked after 3 mornings of sitting at the same level. So he took one step back to equalize it. "After Patricia, I needed to know who you actually were," he said. "Before I trusted you with more responsibility. I needed to see who you were when you had no reason to be anything particular." "And what did you see?" He looked at her steadily. "I saw someone who made extra food in the morning because there was always someone who needed it. I saw someone who sat on a curb with a stranger and talked about him like he mattered. I saw someone who gave advice about reconciling with a son without knowing she was talking to a man who actually had a son he had not called in 2 years. Something moved across her face at that. "You have a son you haven't spoken to," she said. "Marcus. He's 31. We had a falling out after his mother passed. Things were said. I kept waiting to feel ready to fix it." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "Call him today. Not when you feel ready. Today." With nothing prepared, Thomas looked at her. "You tested me for 3 mornings, she said. "The least I can do is give you the same advice I would have given the man I thought you were." He almost smiled. "Just barely. I owe you an apology," he said. "For the method, not for the result, because the result was that I confirmed you are exactly who I believed you to be. But for the method, yes. You deserved better than that." She considered this with the same calm directness she brought to everything. "You were burned," she said, "by someone who sat at your table and drank your coffee and took from you while appearing warm. I understand why you needed a check." She paused. "It doesn't mean it didn't sting, but I understand it. I know it stings. I am sorry." She nodded once. The apology received and filed. Then she bent down and picked up the water bottle she had left on the curb and held out her hand. He looked at it. Then he shook it. "Am I still employed?" she said, and there was the smallest edge of dry humor in it. "Grace Obie," he said, "you are not only still employed. Effective today, you are the household manager for all 3 of my properties, with the salary that comes with it." She looked at him with those direct, calm eyes. "I don't need a reward for being a decent person." "It is not a reward for being decent," he said. "It is compensation for the work you have been doing without the title. There is a difference." She thought about that. Then she nodded. "Call your son," she said. She walked back toward the gate. "Grace." She stopped but didn't turn around. "Thank you for the jollof rice." She turned then and looked at him over her shoulder, and this time the almost smile became an actual one, small and real, and nothing performed about it. "I made extra," she said simply. Then she went back inside to do her work. Thomas stood on the curb outside his own gate for another minute. Then he pulled out his phone. He found Marcus in his contacts. He sat with his thumb over the call button the way she had described, waiting to feel ready, recognizing that feeling ready was not coming. He pressed call. It rang 3 times. Then his son's voice. "Dad." Thomas closed his eyes for 1 second. "Marcus, I know I'm late. I'm calling anyway." The line was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus said, "Okay, I am listening." Thomas stood on the sidewalk outside his own house in a thrift store coat with $6 shoes and talked to his son for the first time in 2 years. And it was not perfect, and it was not easy, and it was the best thing he had done in longer than he could honestly remember. Inside the house, Grace Obie set down her bag, put on her apron, and went to work. No performance, no waiting for acknowledgement. Just the quiet dignity of a person who had always known exactly who she was and had never needed a test to prove it. So people are like that. And when you're lucky enough to have one of them in your life, the only right thing to do is make sure they know you see them. Thomas Hale finally did. If this story moved you, please like this video right now and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell because there is always another story coming and you absolutely do not want to miss it. Drop a comment below and tell me, would you have been angry at Thomas for the test, or would you have understood it the way Grace did? I want to hear from every single one of you. See you in the next one.